Hey, Danny, welcome back again.
Hey, Erwin. Yeah, as always, great to be here. Thanks again for the invite.
Yeah, love having you on. Interesting. We were talking about in one of our other podcasts with people that work with different teams, people that work with others who may or may not think they're working as hard or are working harder or whatever the case is. But you're in Austria, you are in Europe, and you're a leader of people, right, in the workplace. And want to get your perspective because you were talking international, right? And it's a fantastic dynamic where obviously customer is always king, right? Is how we look at it. But from a sales perspective and talking to customers, getting a chance to learn them, and then navigating the culture and communication in the workplace, not just with customers, but also team that you're leading. What are kind of some of the things that you could share, pros and cons that you're going through today, right? There's obviously the culture shock of leadership speaking a foreign language, but then there's also the part to where you're dealing and working and managing a team the best of your ability and obviously to follow the goals of the company. What can you share with your experiences so far?
No, it's really interesting. And I've primarily worked here in Europe. I even started 10 years ago, initially in cosmetics, and then I went on to do lighting. So in-home lighting or, just styling lighting. And now I'm working in furniture sales, just kind of as it comes. I take it on as it comes. There are definitely challenges that I face every day just as a person, nothing to do with the culture, just generally speaking in that sense, where, you're managing your team or you're trying to keep an eye on your team. Even before I was in management, when I was just one of the regular, worker bees, so to say, filling in those goals of other people or for your company. Communication is absolutely key, and it's something that is make or break in a team, no matter what position you have within that team. Sometimes things get said to you from, for example, a boss tells me something, and I don't understand what he means by that, and I don't understand why it's important because it's never been communicated to me why it's important. And I remember, for example, in my first position in cosmetics, I had a very, very kind boss who wanted me to do well, but there were things that he would just tell me or say to me. And I was very confused by why it needed to be done in this way. And then as I was there for those couple of years and learning more about the management positions and also what was, kind of put on them, it became more apparent to me that, oh, he wasn't asking me to do this because of this or that reason. It was because this is a standard that is demanded of us within this industry because of these reasons, or being in this mall, this is a standard that we're held to through them. And it's something that I've definitely tried through the years, really to just communicate with my teammates, with people who may be under me or above me or at my, same level, no matter what position I'm in, is to really just explain this needs to be done, but also why does it need to be
Right,
done? And why does it
right.
need to be done in this way? Because I do think that that's a huge issue within companies in this day and age is just there's a lack of communication. There shouldn't be, but there is somehow. And it's definitely difficult. I don't know if you've also experienced this, Erwin, but working with, the new generation coming in, they're coming in and they have been raised on technology. They have been raised on cell phones. And we're kind of in that unique age where we have both, where we've experienced both. And it's working with the younger, I don't want to say kids, but working with the younger people or the younger generations and saying things, like this shelf needs to be completely redesigned. It needs to be completely redone. And there's almost a lack of I don't understand why you need that to be done, or I don't understand how you want it to be done. And also if I can use this word without being critical, almost a laziness that I definitely feel from that generation in a sense. And I don't even mean it in a bad way because there's a lot of things that they can do or do that I cannot or that I do
Right.
not.
Right, right.
For example, running, the social media campaigns and everything, there are things that they understand way better than I do. There are things that I also have to attribute to it being my second language, where I have incredible German, if I can say that.
It is.
Thank you. I speak fluently, have no issues with it whatsoever. However, there are times or even customers, as you said before, customer is king. And interestingly enough, it's no different here, although you wouldn't think it. When you go shopping here or when you go to a restaurant here, the customer is the king and customer satisfaction is important, but it is just there's almost a sense, I don't even mean it in a way of rudeness, but there is just a sense of efficiency and that this is the way that it's done and this is the way it needs to be done. And there's not a whole lot of patience on one side or the other, whether it be the customer communicating with me or with my team, or whether it's the other way around where we're communicating with them. There's just this efficiency that needs to be given attention. And when it's not, then that's when issues kind of come to scene as well. However, again, it comes back to communication is who's sitting in front of me? Who am I talking to? Is this someone that I can sit and make jokes with? Is this someone I need to be very, honest, truthful, and black to white, on paper, this is what it is, this is what it looks like. And it's just also, changing who's in front of you and dealing with it.
Right. Right.
It is challenging in a different language. This is terminology or words that, maybe I necessarily also didn't know in English. Working with, for example, when I did lighting, there were words that I couldn't say in English because I didn't know what the English word was, but I used it on a daily basis in German. And for that reason, communication was all the more important, just making sure that I didn't, miscommunicate something or say something wrong. And that is a challenge, having to second guess. Did I say that? Did I say that properly? Did I accidentally say, no, I don't want warm lighting when actually they did want warm lighting? Or is that did I do that right? And there's just always this kind of second guess, this little voice in your head. And I try my very hardest, and I would suggest this to anyone who works in customer service, is if you can, write everything down and put it in contract.
Absolutely.
You can talk and talk and talk, but sometimes certain things need to be written down as like, oh, that's right, we said that. Okay.
Well, here's an interesting thing, right? And you bring up valid points with the communication, right? In the U, there's a difference obviously with what we do here in the US versus what others do around the world, but everything comes down to culture. And doesn't mean culture is wrong. It's just adapting. You talk about how you communicate with customers so well, right? You get to learn from them. I'm sure others who are not used to that method or that process or that personality type, which to me, my opinion, I've seen it succeed time and time again, right? To get to know people. That's consultative selling. That's also just getting to know people, and it shows that you care. And parts of some of the things I've read, like in Austria, work and private life are strictly separated, right? Here, and then the American optimism, right? In sales can sometimes be met with skepticism, and I would say the communication part, that there's like a directness gap, right? Like I would say US, we often use the sandwich method, right? For feedback, where you're going to say something positive, then negative, then positive again. So it's kind of like, hey, good job. By the way, we need to improve this, but you're doing great. So, in Austria, from what I've read, feedback is often blunt, right? Focus on only what's wrong. How did you adjust? I would say for you, Danny, how did you adjust your leadership style to give and receive feedback without it feeling personal to the people you're leading?
Yes. Well, I am a very emotional person, and this has been quite the challenge for me, not only in Austria as well as in Germany over the last 10 years, where sometimes I'll take something that someone says, and I'll see it immediately as, oh my God, I did something wrong, and I'll cry. And then the Germans and the Austrians are like, oh my God, okay. And that's on me having, not necessarily that awesome ability to be able to separate it as much, but it is important, and it is absolutely something that is not only encouraged, but it is just, as you said before, Erwin, it's the way that things are here, where it's just very separate. It is something where I try to take it on as, yes, I am the outsider in that. I am the foreigner, so to say. So I need to be more open-minded to hearing these criticisms, and also not to see it as a criticism, but rather as a critique. Because there is a difference between criticizing the way someone does something or critiquing it. And my style, I have now been in my management position for just about 6 months now. And I had earlier one as well in Germany. Then through a move, I switched and it just wasn't an option, but that's absolutely fine. But I got hired in a management position, and it's been a challenge for me to also keep myself from criticizing, but rather just critiquing and working with younger people, or even, one of my trainees, for example. It's a very interesting system here. He's doing a trainee program and he's 54 years old. And it's just working with, how is this person? How can I talk to them? How can I get this message across that this is what needs to be done, but also in a way that they see it as, right, of course it needs to be done in this way, and that they also kind of want it to be done correctly, so to say, if I can get a little German. And I can be a little German in that way. It has to be done properly, but it has been a challenge. I write schedules for my entire team, and I try to talk to them before, is there a day or an evening? Do you need to change something around on the schedule? And if they tell me, great, I try my best to make it work. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. And then they'll come to me once the plan is already there. They'll come to me 2 days before and they'll say, hey, I need that day off. And I can't change it, at the last minute, not because that's my rule, but it's because it's the company rule. And I try and explain that to them. And then it ends up being, well, Danielle's the manager who won't let me, take the night off or take the day off. And it's like, well, and it's just kind of working with that, where how do I change my communication, or how do I change the way I'm talking to you to make you, or to have you not take this as a criticism, but a critique, where, well, if you had told me before, then I would have been able to change it. But also saying, oh, yeah, that sounds really fun. I don't know if I can make it work this time, but you know what? If something like this comes up again, just tell me a few weeks before and we'll make sure we get it in the schedule. And it shouldn't be a problem. Just making sure that I'm speaking also at eye level. That's something that's been very important to me my entire professional life. And it's something that I have also received very positive feedback on. Is, for me, it doesn't matter if it's the CEO of the company or the cleaning lady. I talk to everybody and treat everybody the same. And if I'm upset and need to talk about something in a more serious tone or a more serious matter, I'm going to. And if I need to be a different, type of manager, if I need to be calm, if I need to be very, what do they call that? Like gentle parenting,
Right, right.
then I can change that as well. And it's just very important to also think about who's sitting in front of you, who's standing in front of you. How do I communicate with this person? How does this person communicate with me? How can we make this work? Because if your team doesn't work, your department isn't going to work. And if your department doesn't work, then you're going to have bigger problems in the larger scope of things.
And I like that. I like how you describe that. And I think part of it too is, you're doing your duty to be a good manager, and it's, earning respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of companies, a lot of industries where it could be quite hierarchical, right? And title heavy, for example, right? You're an expat manager. Did you find it that you had to prove your competence differently than you would have had to have done, say, maybe in the US, right? Based on, again, you mentioned the language, the culture, but what's your thoughts on that, on the earning respect part? And did it have anything to do with you maybe even being a woman, right?
I need to get some water. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Erwin, let's try to take that again.
No problem.
So let's try that again.
Okay.
Can you
We'll start over again. Here we
repeat
go.
the questions?
Yeah, I'll start again. Okay, here we go. Ready, set. All right. So you mentioned a few things with, with what you're doing with culture, with the folks that you're working with, and asking people if schedules you're doing, you're doing a good job with being a manager and leading. And now there's this earning the respect part, right? Companies, countries, locations can be quite hierarchical and title heavy, right? And you as an expat manager, right, you're going through a lot. And how would you say that how did you find you had to prove your competence in the field, right? Differently than what you probably had to do in the US, where was the respect earned, you know, easily, hard, continuing, and did have to do with you being a woman?
Absolutely. To all of it. It has been a daily challenge, and it will continue to be a daily challenge, in that I have every single day, there's something that comes up that either I have to question, okay, what does that word mean? Or what did he mean when he said that? Or, okay, I can't question that because I don't want them to think that I'm incompetent, or I don't want them to think that it's, just my little foreign brain doing its thing or my little American brain doing its thing. I do try my hardest to listen as much as I can. I do a lot of listening, a lot less talking, which you might not notice in this interview, but it's been a challenge for me, to be listening more than being actively, the one speaking. There have been moments and situations where I do feel like it would be easier if I was from here. It would be easier if it was my mother tongue. I do have a lot of professional support from my team, from colleagues, from bosses as well. And it's not even just in my position now, it's been in every position. And I'm very grateful for that. Going also back to that point before of having, the communication and having bosses speak to me or me speak to my team now, it is difficult. There are moments where I do not feel taken seriously because I do have, for example, an accent, or my German, as good as it is or as amazing as it is, there are still things that I, daily mess up. What I notice more as a challenge is being a slightly small, you can't tell on the computer, but I'm 5'4", so I'm slightly small, I'm a female, and I'm foreign. And that's kind of like that trifecta all working together, where there are challenges that come up on a daily basis within the German, the Austrian work world. It was not something I was prepared for. It was not something that I thought would have been an issue, but through the past few years and my past few jobs, it is obvious, it is prevalent in life. And it's just something that you have to take on as it comes. The best way that I've managed it is, if you do your job and you do your job well, no one can say anything. It doesn't matter what they think.
Right. Right. And I that's why I was asking, because I think, a lot of people, sometimes it's a sensitive topic, right? And earning respect, people can be quite backwards, let's just say, right? They're not progressive
Hmm.
and they're dismissive, right? Some
Oh, yeah.
people, doesn't matter if it's in Austria, Germany, or US, there's this sometimes dismissive label where, you know, countries have. You just talked about it. Some of these things where certain ways that people are and how they run a business or communicate are there. So what would you say is a way people distinguish between a cultural trait and a genuine performance issue on your team? Because you have to look at it now, being a foreigner, understanding as an expat, you're looking and, okay, is this person or this group of people doing things a certain way? Is it cultural or is it a genuine issue? How do you distinguish that, right? And, not dismissing it necessarily.
That is a great question. For example, this sounds silly, but there is, smoking is still very much something that people in Austria do. In Germany as well, just in Europe. And going out for a smoke break, for example, is just very understood. It's like, okay, I need to go have a cigarette. And everyone here is just, oh my gosh, of course, go. It helps with the nerves. It just is helpful for keeping your workflow going and everything. Whereas, in America, it was like, no, you can do that on your own time in a way. And that's something, just as a small example of just a cultural thing, where it's something you just have to kind of go along with. When I'm in a rush and I'm needing an answer from one of my colleagues and I can't find them on the floor and I ask where they are, and well, they're on a smoke break. And it's like, okay, well, in America, that wouldn't happen. But in Europe, we allow that. There are things within, just when I think about my team, that when we have an issue. The company I work for now, we like to say that we don't work with problems, we work with solutions. So I wouldn't even say that it's a problem, but it is just a matter of kind of seeing something that's not being done, or not being done in the right way or at the right tempo, and going to the people who I've asked, for example, to do that, and for who I've asked to take care of it, and talking to them about, why hasn't this been done? Genuinely asking why. Like, was something in the way? Did you not have enough time? Was I expecting
Right.
too much of you? Just being very open and listening, and then kind of going to, okay, I understand why, and now let's talk about how we can change that, how we can work on that. Do you need me to man the floor and work with customers so you don't get interrupted in your task? And that's, I think, also just country to country all over the world. That is something that we could all benefit from, is
Yeah.
just having a little bit more of that patience and a little bit more of that curiosity. Whether it be professional, whether it be in your private life, is just asking, okay, well, why is this way? Okay, now I understand the way you see it, the way you're viewing it, the way you're taking it on. And now let's talk about how we can adjust that and change that and work with this so that maybe in the future it doesn't happen, or that we understand each other better. Because it is very important to me as well to not just be a boss, but to also, be amicable with my colleagues and be able to have a good relationship. Because if you don't have to be friends, but if you get along, your work life will be better as well if you have that
Right.
mutual
Right.
respect for each other.
Yeah, and that's a that's great feedback, right? You brought up, and I think that's something to heed for the folks listening, right? And I always say, a lot of companies, a lot of them don't do it, right, Danny? They go in and there's a culture that you're in right now where people keep their work selves and private selves separate, right? There's often a lack of vulnerability, right? Based trust, right? So in the teams, if the teams feel dismissive, it's usually because they don't yet see the of the relationship, and I think it seems like that's like one of the biggest hurdles for, say, managers that are in any country, right? Is breaking through that initial frost, let's just call it. And that's why it's so vital for companies, in my opinion, and opinions of others, and I advise people to invest more heavily in structured team building. Right. And
Hmm.
it's not just having fun, it's about establishing like a common operational system and building the psychological safety needed to bridge these cultural gaps, right? When you invest in the trust, the dismissive melts away, and you're left with the incredible loyalty and precision that your team, the people you work with, friends, workforce is going to be known for. And in closing, work is always going to have its challenges. It's always going to have the good things, the bad things. You're always going to be judged whether you're, again, a foreigner speaking a different language. People will always have play favorites. There will be politics. There will always be the male female side that just seems unfair. Just got to work through it, and battle. And I love what you shared and explained with how you manage. And again, and I think a lot of this can be put at ease, not necessarily completely solved for, but team building, which then creates that structure. So yeah, I would say to the folks listening in, don't give up, you keep fighting, take deep breaths out there. It is stressful. And don't forget, what got you here to begin with, right, guys? And just keep fighting. And Danny, thank you for that insight that you shared, and this is really good. And a lot of the points you made, being an expat again, and being having this as your second language, it's invaluable. And I really appreciate you taking your time to share this with us today.
Not thank you so much for having me again, Erwin. It was great. And hey, I just if I help one person, then I'm happy.
What we're here for. Thank you, Danny.
Perfect.
Appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Erwin. Talk to you soon.
You bye.